to the April edition of The Coffee House, where in the next hour, we'll preview the forthcoming Washington, D.C. International Film Festival with Festival Chief Tony Gittens and our Pat Aufderheide. Also, the ethics and law of assisted suicide with Dr. Henry Silverman of the University of Maryland Hospital Center. The night watchman, Eric Brace, puts down his pen and straps on his folk rock guitar. And sports writer Jim Naughton on the peculiar relationship between fan and local sports hero. Plus, a DJ Renegade poem, the top 10 lists for book and CD sales and video rentals, and Jerry Falwell and the Telletubbies. Hi, and welcome to the Coffee House. And spring, and with spring, come festivals. To name just two, there's Tacoma Park's Jazz Fest 4 coming up on Saturday, May 22nd. And there's FilmFest DC 13 at area theaters from April 21st through May 2nd. This year, the festival features over 75 films and events, all of them DC area premieres, with a spotlight on Latin American cinema. But not only Latin cinema. Here to fill us in on what's in store for this year's Washington, D.C. International Film Festival are its executive director, Tony Gittens, and our film maven, Pat Aufderheide. Welcome to the Coffee House.
Mark, how are you?
Tony, why don't you give us a little bit of an overview of what's in store this year for the Film Fest?
Well, this is our 13th year, and the festival always aims to bring the best in new films from around the world to the Washington, D.C. area. Every year we feature a country or an area of the world, and this year we're doing Latin America. The films from this year from Latin America are just outstanding. And we have so many special events, it would take a while to list them, but our opening night will be a film called The Red Violin, a wonderful big epic from Canada. And our closing night, we have a special treat. The Italian filmmaker Bernardo Bertolucci will be joining us. So we have a lot happening this year, and like to invite your audience to come out and share it with us.
How do you select films for the festival?
We attend a lot of other film festivals. That's the main way. So we go to Cannes, we go to Toronto, we go to Montreal, number of festivals throughout the world, and we get just dozens and dozens of cassettes that people submit to us. So we spend a lot of time in the dark. We spend a lot of time watching TV. We go through maybe 400, 450 films before we get to around the 70 or so that we show.
And I suspect, Pat, that among these films there are directors that many of our viewers probably aren't familiar with, but that are pretty major players on the international cinema stage.
Well, I think that's the wonderful thing about the film festival. Every year you see, you can see work that you might not have ever known, and you can also see the evolution of work. I'm really happy that we've got the latest film from Arturo Ripstein, somebody whose name is not a household word here.
Arturo Ripstein.
Arturo Ripstein, probably one of Mexico's biggest name directors. There are 20 retrospectives of his work being held this year around the world. His latest film is Divine. It's incredibly...
Is that the name of it, or is that a
It's
description?
called Divine. Sorry. That's its name. And it is like the rest of Arturo Ripstein's work, totally over the top. It's excessive in every possible way. It takes your breath away.
Huh. One of the films is going to be a new film by Claude Chabrol, starring Isabelle Huppert, called The Swindle. Tony, you want to tell us a little bit about it before we take a look at it?
Well, Claude Chabrol has made just dozens of films, and this is his latest film. It's a caper kind of film, and it constantly keeps you wondering who is doing what to whom, who's with whom. And I must say that I was quite surprised at the ending of the film. So we invited it because we just thought it was a lot of fun.
All right, we're not going to see the ending, but let's take a look at a clip from this film.
Un an. Tu le connais depuis un an, bah dis donc bravo. Tu sais préserver ton jardin secret.
Oh, écoute, le prends pas comme ça, on dirait un vieux barbon.
Ah oui, c'est ça, oui. Oui, quand tu vas prendre l'air, comme tu dis, c'est le sien que tu vas respirer.
On arrive, écoute-moi au lieu de dire des bêtises. Il est ici pour un transfert d'argent. Après-demain, il va retirer une très grosse somme pour l'apporter aux Antilles.
Qu'est-ce que c'est que tu trafiques?
Ça, je crois qu'il vaut mieux pas le savoir. Mais il y a 5 millions de francs. Suisses.
Combien tu dis?
Suisses, dans la mallette.
Répète, combien tu dis?
5 millions.
Et il t'a raconté tout ça comme ça?
1 an de travail, mon petit père.
Regarde-moi ça, me confierait l'argent du Téléthon. Tu sais que ça pue la rage, ton histoire. Hein?
L'argent suisse n'a pas d'odeur.
Formidable! J'ai une fan de loup!
Tony, are we apt to see a film like Swindle at area cineplexes anytime soon?
Sometime soon. This is a film that will open. I'm not sure when it will open commercially, maybe during the summer. We show a couple of films like that, but most of what we show, there is no opportunity to see it outside of places like FilmFest DC.
Mm-hmm. And what are the various criteria that you look at when you select a film?
That question comes to us, I can't tell you how many times.
I only asked you once.
Well, probably the first thing is if we didn't show it, might it not get shown? We look for quality films. Over the years, we've come to know our audience, know what they enjoy. We do try to bring back filmmakers over the years so that people can get a sense of how this filmmaker's work is progressing. We try to have a representation of world cinema. So we will try to always have something Asian, always have something from Africa, some things from Europe. We try to present what is, in our opinion, the broadest representation of what has been produced in the last year or two. So there's no sheet that I can give one, no list of criteria that we tick off. It's a mixture of a number of things, and I guess a lot of it is intuitive.
One Asian director who's featured this year is Hanif Kureishi. I said that right? Who many of our viewers probably know for My Beautiful Laundrette,
Yes.
but he's out with a new film, and it touches on themes of colonialism and identity and arising from colonialism. Can you talk a little bit as background, Pat?
Oh, Hanif Kureishi he lives in England, and he's the child of a Pakistani family, and he's kind of the voice of that new transnational, post-colonial culture that has arisen and speaks very, very much across boundaries. And I think that's what I like about all of his work, is it crosses boundaries and at the same time as it does something daring and unusual, he's always inveterately funny.
And in fact, this film is a comedy of some sort called My Son the Fanatic. You have anything you'd like to say about it before we see it?
What I really liked about this film is how it switched what was expected, that a lot of films are about first-generation immigrants who come to a European country, and usually it's the children who want to become more and more Western and the parents that want to stick to tradition. This is a film that switches it in a very humorous way, so I thought it was something that we should show.
All right, well, let's take a look.
All engagement party details personally. Our tradition is beautiful in this respect. You enjoy our food when I bring it personally to police headquarters. Chief Inspector, please inform me absolutely in confidence. Fareed is top police material, isn't he?
Isn't he training to be an accountant?
Law and order might be more reliable. Crime is everywhere out of control. Wouldn't you confirm? My boy says the same. Get camera. Now is moment. Please, sir, would a pose be all right? For private use exclusively. Bring champagne too. Please. Hey, Fareed. Ready? Smile. Smile.
Pat, you go to a lot of film festivals. FilmFest DC, what niche does it have within the international film festival community?
You know, there are festivals that, as Tony points out, are the places where you will find the buyers, the people screaming into their cell phones in the middle of a movie, trying to finish the deal before the movie's over. And it is that kind of festival that I think provides the forum for DC Film Fest to be able to pick from. And this, I think FilmFest DC is like other major city festivals in major cities around the world where world cinema is brought to us in a world in which all of world cinema is not available to us at the Cineplex. It's not going to have that little perfect mix of, you know, froth and the stuff that will make it commercial to a wide audience, but it will have a very intense audience in this setting.
And based upon experience, Tony, how many people do you expect to attend all the various showings in FilmFest 13?
Well, our attendance has gone up every year of the 12 years we've been doing it. Last year we did 31,000 that we counted. This year it always goes up. I expect it's going to go up, and we're looking at 35,000. Our problem is not getting people to come. Our problem is finding places for them to come when they do come, and to maintain a well-managed event, which we have, and we've been complimented on that. So people do come. There is a thirst for it. Let me just add to what Pat was saying about the niche that FilmFest DC plays. There are a number of festivals. There are like 200, 300 festivals in the world. And the ones that most people know about, Sundance, Cannes, Toronto to some extent, a lot of these take place in resort areas, and they're really markets. They're not about what we're about. You know, we're about presenting films for people who live in this area, to give them an opportunity to see these films where they normally would not have that opportunity. And that's the niche that we play. I mean, we're here to serve people who live in this area, and that's what we're about, and pretty much all that we're about.
And one film that people might have already seen, A Hard Day's Night.
Well, old folks like you might have
old
seen
folks
that,
like me.
We want to think there's some younger folks who haven't seen it.
Well, that's right. I stand corrected. But if you were wondering where, for instance, MTV came from,
right.
Its origins probably go back to director Richard Lester in the film A Hard Day's Night. You want to talk a little about this film, Pat, before we see a clip from it?
Well, you know, Richard Lester is an American who moved to England and made this movie with the Beatles, and it's a really, really interesting film. It's now being marketed, it's being re-released. It's now being marketed as a documentary, but those of us who went to it recall that it is, in fact, a fiction film about the Beatles being on tour. It's most remarkable for the way it was cut, because it introduced these slash cuts, and fast montages that really hadn't been seen since Siga Vertov and, you know, the early Russians in that particular format, except in advertising, which is where its future was. And Richard Lester, you know, brought it all to us.
Well, let's take a look at it.
And I'm going to keep in, even after I put the lock in the key and turn it. We're out!
Tony, we're almost out of time. Quickly, if people want more information about FilmFest 13?
They can call our hotline, and that number is 202-628-FILM. Real easy to remember, 202-628-FILM.
Many thanks to Tony Gittens from DC Film Fest and our Pat Aufderheide for joining us tonight. Still to come, assisted suicide, the law and ethics of helping someone take their own life. The folk rock sounds of night watchman Eric Brace, sports writer Jim Naughton on fans and local sports heroes, and a DJ Renegade poem. But first,
on my way to Webb's carryout, I bump into Brandy outside the beauty salon. Guess who's inside, she smiles. I ride a merry-go-round of unsuccessful guesses, then forget my rule about beauty salons and follow her inside. There in a swiveling chair, her head sprouting new braids, is my ex-girlfriend Charlotte. What's up, she smiles as the beautician holds a lighter to the end of a braid. And despite the lingering fragrance of hairspray or the air fresheners beside the light bulb-lined mirror, the smell of burning hair reaches me. And before I can dash to the door, I'm 2.5 years old at the kitchen table with Mark, who just turned 3. We bang spoons against our bowls as my mother prepares oatmeal. I'm in my flannel pajamas with the feet attached, giggling because Mark just stuck a raisin up his nose. I look up to see if the oatmeal is ready. The sleeve of Mommy's terry cloth robe dangles above the blue fingers of flame. As she stirs the stiffening glop, her sleeve flickers. My tiny mouth opens as flames blossom past her elbow, leaping from her collar to her curling hair. She turns as if tapped. The scream which ignites my ears is brighter than any flame. I drop my spoon as she wrestles with the orange animal clawing into her head. She stumbles towards the cellar door. I can hear her body bounce off stairs until she crumples at the bottom, and only the flames move. Suddenly, I feel Charlotte and her hairdresser staring at me. But I'm still 2.5 in my favorite pajamas which button down the back and can't explain. So I bust out the door, lungs gasping. Charlotte rushes out. Are you okay? How do I say my mother is a flame inside my head and I can't stop it from happening? My tongue searches, but there is no air. Maybe when my lungs clear, I'll remember that I called Uncle Covey into the kitchen, that he leaped down the stairs and smothered my mother's smoking back. I'll recollect how she cheated on the coin toss with 40% of her body skinless until Jesus walked into the burn unit and held out his hand. I'll recall her giving up 2 packs a day, ruby red lipstick, and bourbon in corner bars to become born again. But right now, I'm only 2.5, in my blue PJs with the red racing cars, staring from the top of the stairs as Mommy's hair shrivels in the flames.
Hello and welcome to In Sickness and in Health. The US Constitution guarantees citizens a right to life, liberty and the pursuit of happiness. But does that right include, for a hopelessly pained person, the right to die as well? And if you have the right to die, may somebody else help you end your life? Clearly, Dr. Jack Kevorkian thinks so, and a number of juries sitting in judgment of Kevorkian seem to agree and have refused to find him guilty of assisting a suicide. Last month, however, Kevorkian was convicted of second-degree homicide. He not only provided a terminally ill man who wanted to die with the means to end his life, that would have been assisted suicide, but Kevorkian himself injected the patient with a deadly cocktail of drugs. The doctor's supporters called it mercy killing. But no state allows mercy killing. Oregon actually permits assisted suicide. There are laws on the books against assisted suicide in the District of Columbia and Virginia, and as Ross Adams reports, the General Assembly in Maryland recently passed a measure that would make assisted suicide a criminal offense there as well.
The bill makes it a crime for a health provider to help someone commit or attempt to commit suicide.
Doctors and it, well, we're supposed to be caring people. We don't play God. And you're playing God when you take somebody's life in your hands.
Delegate Valderrama says he wants to prevent someone like Dr. Jack Kevorkian from emerging in Maryland. Valderrama claims the bill is simple and to the point.
When you provide the physical means for somebody to die, somebody says, I want to die, and you as the doctor or as an individual gives the physical means for that to materialize, then that is assisted suicide.
But, says longtime State Senator Jennie Forehand, the issue is not so simple and the bill is not to the point. Forehand fears it's patients who will be made to suffer by a statutory ban.
The hearing, the people who spoke the most strongly against this prohibition were older people who said, leave us alone. We know how to handle ourselves when we get into a terminal situation. And don't make criminals of our friends and our spouses who might give us a pill that we want, and we have written into our will that we want if when we get to a certain point and if we're in great pain.
Forehand notes that assisting a suicide is already a criminal offense under common law, and she worries the new law will make caregivers too conservative in treating pain.
If you were in the last stages of a terminal illness and were in great pain and you wanted to end your own life, your doctor might be afraid to give you as much pain medication as is necessary, because if he gave you too much and it ended your life, then he or she would be subject to these penalties.
Not so, counters Delegate Valderrama. The law only applies, he insists, if the caregiver's purpose is to prescribe a lethal dosage. If the purpose is instead to relieve pain, the assisted suicide law would not apply, even if the patient dies from an overdose. To which Senator Forehand replies, how can a judge or jury really know what the doctor's purpose was? And that's no small matter, since the law gives family members a right to sue health professionals for civil damages in an assisted suicide. And it subjects the caregiver to criminal penalties of up to 3 years in prison and up to a $10,000 fine for violating the assisted suicide law. For the Coffee House, I'm Ross Adams.
Thanks, Ross. As we taped this show, Governor Glendenning was yet to sign the bill into law, but it was expected to do so. How will this new assisted suicide law affect the practice of medicine in Maryland? Here to discuss the many ethical and practical issues raised by this law is Dr. Henry Silverman, professor at the University of Maryland School of Medicine and chair of the school's ethics committee. Welcome to the Coffee House.
Thank you.
What will this law mean then for anybody in Maryland and for doctors especially?
Well, I think the intent of the law is to prevent doctors from assisting in the suicide of their patients. However, as we just saw, there is a law against murder, and also it's a common law crime to assist in the suicide of someone else. So I really don't see the law achieving its intended effect. In fact, I'm very much concerned about the fact that doctors will be even more conservative in prescribing adequate pain medications for their patients, and hence I think the real effect of the law is that a lot more patients are going to suffer as they enter the dying process.
Doctors will be scared of being sued for having prescribed narcotics then to relieve pain, and
that's right.
The patients will just have to face the end with much more discomfort.
That's exactly right. That's the concern I have and other people have as well.
Why is there this push to get this law passed then? I mean, there must be some
well, there must be something going on, but I don't know what it is. I guess maybe there is a fear that a Jack Kevorkian will show up in this state, maybe a clone. I don't know. But surely we're not reading in the papers that there is a rash of assisted suicide going on in this state. So I'm not sure what's except for ideological reasons, I'm not sure what's motivating this bill.
But ideological reasons are strong. I mean, it is against many people's religion. There are just a bad feeling about helping someone die. It's something that is very visceral for many people. How do we answer that?
Well, again, there is a law against murder and a common law, and assisted suicide is a common law crime. So I feel, as well as others do, that there are enough protections in the state already to help with the fear that there will be more assisted suicides in the state.
What about going the other way? Oregon has in fact allowed assisted suicide. How successful has that been, that bill?
Well, I think it's interesting that you bring up that law, because everyone was concerned that once that law was passed, that everybody would be going to that state to engage in assisted suicide. But just recently, the people from Oregon published their first-year experience with the law, and only 15 people quote unquote took advantage of that law and achieved death via assisted suicide. So even when you have a law, there isn't a rash of assisted suicide going on. So hence, again, the question is, where is the fear of assisted suicide?
How accurate might that figure of 15 be? Perhaps there's just a more relaxed attitude amongst physicians, and the patients are more able to have help without necessarily registering it, if you like.
I mean, there is always that concern about the so-called underground actions going on, and one always may be concerned about that, but I don't think the law is going to prevent something from happening that is already happening. And to be sure, I'm sure some acts of assisted suicide are occurring, but I think that if a physician is going to do it, I don't think having it now criminalized is going to prevent the physician. Again, I don't think the law is going to affect the practice of medicine concerning assisted suicide. I think the real concern is the palliative care that patients are getting. And study after study has shown that palliative care study after study has shown that physicians are not delivering good palliative care. So
reduction of pain.
That's right. So I would like to see a law passed that would help the practice of medicine in regards to palliative care.
What about the risk that somebody who knows this assisted suicide law exists, perhaps in Oregon, and is ill, is under pressure, either their own altruistic reasons, not wanting to encumber their family or caretakers, or in fact comes under pressure, subtle though it may be, from their family to just end it earlier than they otherwise would?
Well, first, I think we have to realize that we live in a web of relationships, and many times many times patients are concerned about the effect of their illness on their loved ones, and I think that's a genuine moral concern to have. In fact, today, many patients elect to forego life-sustaining treatments or to have life-sustaining treatments withdrawn because of the concern that their illness will be a burden on their family members, and hence we withdraw life-sustaining treatments all the time.
It's good you mention it. It's different from assisted suicide, although it may mount to the same. If somebody is on a life-supporting system and has written in a living will or given family members instructions that they do not wish that to happen, you know that by pulling out the ventilator or denying liquids, this person will die.
That's
Where's the distinction?
That's right. Well, that's a good question. I think the distinction is only in the act itself, meaning that in one case you're giving someone the means to end their life, whereas in the other case, the withdrawal of the ventilator, you're taking something away. Now, some people see a distinction in the two acts. However, the question is there a moral distinction between the two acts? Because in both cases, the intention may be the same, where in the first case with the assisted suicide, the intention is to end life. And in a lot of cases, not all cases, but in a lot of cases where you withdraw the ventilator, the intention is to cause a quicker death. Yet that is okay. And one has to ask the question, why is that? Why is there a distinction? Let me give another scenario to help point out the lack of a distinction between those two acts. If someone came into a hospital and disconnected all the patients from the ventilator, okay, that person would be charged with murder.
Murder, yeah.
And yet when we do it at the bedside, we don't call it murder. So are we playing a name game here?
When you do it at the bedside, it's at the consent of the patient, whether at the time or in the living will.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. You do it with the consent, and that's what makes that type of murder lawful, is that you have the consent. However, merely having consent doesn't change the cause of death.
good point. Well, we have run out of time, I'm afraid.
Already?
Yes. A big thank you to Dr. Henry Silverman for joining me in the Coffee House to talk about the impact of Maryland's new assisted suicide law and how this will affect healthcare providers and patients alike. I'm Cathy Kristiansen, and this has been In Sickness and in Health.
Still to come, folk rocker Eric Brace and sports fans and their local heroes.
Charleston was once the rage, History has turned a page, Miniskirt is the current thing, Teeny Bopper's the newborn king, and the beat goes on, and the beat goes on. Drums keep pounding a rhythm to the brain. La-di-da-di-dee, la-di-da-da. The grocery store and the supermart, Little girls will break your heart, Men, they still go marching off to war. Electrically, they keep the baseball score. And the beat goes on, and the beat goes on. And the beat goes on and on, and the beat goes on. Grandma's sit in chairs and reminisce. Boys still chase the girls to get a kiss. And the cars, they move faster all the time. Bums still cry, hey buddy, can you spare a dime? And the beat goes on, and the beat goes on, and the beat goes on and on, and the beat goes on, and the beat goes on.
Howdy, Eric.
Hey, hey, Dave.
I'd like to welcome you to the musical traditions segment of Tacoma Coffee House.
Thank you so much.
I guess that's one of the neat things about being a singer-songwriter. You don't always have to do your own material. You can do whatever you want.
Well, you know, there's so many great songwriters out there, and it's pretty arrogant to think that you're as good as Sonny Bono.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I figured it's a great song.
And you know,
and it's one chord.
Well, yeah, yeah. But you can add an interpretation to it, and that I think is what kind of makes it.
Whenever I learn a song, it's almost because I can't do it just like that anyway.
Right.
It's just sort of whatever I've got, that's how I do it.
And maybe that's one of the differences now in you could say the singer-songwriter or new folk singer movement is that it's the interpretive value rather than just, you know, in the old days, let's say 20 years ago, you tried to cover a song exactly as it was.
Right.
You painstakingly had every band member.
Well, it's cool. So many people are putting out albums of cover songs or tribute records that deliberately go toward different interpretations, like that Sean Colvin record of nothing but covers and stuff. That's a great example. She's so good at it. One can only hope.
But let's go back to some original material.
All right. Well, actually, this is a cover of all covers are of originals, but
yeah, that's true.
It's a song on my record, which you happen to have in your
I
hand
happen to have a copy here. Without looking down, do I have it?
That's good.
I have it upright.
It's upright.
Okay. It's terrible to bring it out.
It's of my band Last Train Home. We did it over the past year. It finally came out at the very beginning of '98. And there's a song on there by a friend of mine named Michael Hampton, who used to be in a bunch of punk bands around town. And he was in a band called Manifesto that was moving away from punk. And it's just a great song. And we just did it with mandolins and harmonicas and such. And so
an acoustic version.
An acoustic version of this song. It's called Sugar.
Take it away.
Why don't you lie down? You felt the pressure of the moment. But your decisions are so corrupt, they cloud the mind with faint mistrust. Still it's hard to taste the sugar. Now that you got what you wanted, was it all? And now that you got what you came for, was it all that you were looking for? Was it all that you were looking for in me? Resolution of things without time and space, the girl far out. Cloud the mind and makes you feel so heavy. Now the veil is pulled aside, finished with the run and hide. But still it's hard to taste the sugar. And now that you got what you wanted, was it all, was it all, was it all? And now that you got what you came for, was it all that you were looking for? Was it all that you were looking for in me? In me.
Now, you got a pretty interesting day job. And I must admit, we talked about this ahead of time, just to make sure that it was okay to mention this sort of...
I don't think it's a conflict of interest. I work for the Washington Post.
Yeah.
And I get to write about music.
Right. I mean, it's, you know, it's not like you're doing the, you know, obituary columns or something, which wouldn't be a conflict of interest.
Right. I know. It's hard because most of the I write the Night Watch column for the weekend section every Friday. Yeah. And it's about the local clubs, the local bands, the local bars, local musicians and performers and producers and all that stuff. And they gave me the job because I know about it.
Yeah, it's, I mean, it makes sense when you think about it to have someone that's deeply interested in music to be writing about music as opposed to pulling a plumber off the job and saying, look, you know, we don't want any overlap here.
Yeah, and it's funny, I'm not a critic and I don't pretend to rate the musicians or anything. I mostly just sort of tell the stories about people performing music in town because I think, I remember 10 years ago when I had a band and I had a little record label and I kept on calling up all the writers and critics at the Post, begging them for press, you know?
Right.
And I think they were pretty good to me. But now the shoe's on the other foot. I try to be really sensitive because there are people out there working really hard, getting gigs.
Yeah.
making the calls and writing the songs, and it's hard.
Well, and also, it's an interesting juxtaposition in that I'm interviewing you instead of you going to the club and digging up the manager or the band that's there. And,
I sort of have all these automatic answers that spring to mind, and I try to avoid them.
I feel like I just, wind you up and say, yeah, go ahead,
I've talked to so many musicians. In a way, it's always inspiring, because the people that I choose to write about are usually the ones with real stories to tell, and who I think are some of the better ones. And I'm just always impressed at their spirit.
Well, also the Washington scene is so diverse. You really have the North and the South coming together, and then the international community.
A lot going on.
I mean, you could write that column daily instead of just on Fridays. And
I get really tired of people who say that D.C. is like got no nightlife. It's no Manhattan. I'll grant them that. But after that, I'd rather be here than anywhere. It's got so much going on.
I mean, it's. I'm always astounded, because when I read your column, which I do, because I want to know what's going on.
Thank you.
I'm amazed at how much stuff you can find there.
It's out there.
Yeah. But that's another story. Yeah. Give us one more song.
Sure.
Take us out of here.
This is going to be on the next Last Train Home record. It's called True North.
Thank you.
Date was set, still she couldn't see waking up beside him every day for the rest of her life. She walked and walked through the old part of town in the aftermath of a hurricane. All the lines were down, so hard to get through. Round and round, round it goes. Compass in her heart, back and forth, it's so hard to find true north. She turned up his street and she knocked on his door. She couldn't look him in the eye, and her voice began to shake. Victim of her regret, he listened hard, but he knew right off that her mind would never change. And he never got over it. Round and round, round it goes. Compass in her heart, back and forth, it's so hard to find true north. She looks out on the water at the waves coming in, and she thinks about the man who said, I would die for you, and the one who told her I'll do anything for you. Oh, round and round, round it goes. Back and forth, it's so hard. It's so hard to find true north.
Hi, and welcome to Body and Soul. Hometown heroes are hard to come by these days, especially when so few of us actually live in hometowns anymore. However, Tacoma Park seems a little different. A couple of years ago, we laid claim to Dominique Dawes, the Olympic gold medal gymnast. Now we have Steve Francis, the Maryland basketball All-American, who will go high in the NBA draft. Except, well, let me play devil's advocate. These sports stars, are they legitimate heroes just because they're from here? If so, maybe we fans are living vicariously. What did Tacoma Park really contribute to their success? Did their achievements really take a village? Or is the fact that they are from Tacoma altogether incidental to their success? With me in the studio is Jim Naughton, the nationally acclaimed sports writer, who will contribute a lot of profound thoughts on the subject. At least that's what I told the boss you would do, Jim.
Thank you. Yeah, nice of you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So that kind of build up, that kind of
expectations, right? Yeah.
Set up here. A hero, a local hero. What would be a quick definition? Who deserves to be called a local hero?
You know, when I hear the phrase, I think of Bruce Springsteen. Actually, right. I mean, there's somebody who became incredibly famous, but had a lot of it had to do with mining, where he came from, how he grew up, what that experience was like. In sports, it's a little different because what is it that's local about basketball? Right. I mean, if a kid grows up on the playgrounds in New York, I think then you're talking about a local hero. If the kid grows up as a football player and they're playing in Pittsburgh, someplace where you really identify with the sport, and you say, that's a great culture of football around Western Pennsylvania, or that's a great culture in basketball in New York City or some of the other Chicago. Then I think it makes sense to talk about local heroes when a real athletic culture produces a kid.
Well, all right. Well, let's talk then about Steve Francis, who's the newest hero in the culture that he came from. I mean, he grew up in Tacoma Park, learned basketball there, and it could be argued that without his coaches and without his mentors, maybe he'd still be just playing local playground basketball.
I think he's an interesting case because obviously without a lot of the people who mentored him in Tacoma Park, he might not have become what he's become. On the other hand, we don't think of Steve Francis and say, oh, another in the long line of Tacoma Park basketball stars. So he's
we're just getting started.
Well, he might be the first of his kind, but I do think that he's got this connection with the community. But whether as a local hero, I mean, I don't think people actually knew much about him until he was gone, except for those who really were intimately involved in his life.
Right. No, that's a good point. Let me, for those who don't know this Steve Francis story, it is that he played for the Tacoma Park Boys and Girls Club, played local ball, and really made his mark in the gyms and on the playgrounds in Tacoma Park, not on the high school level.
Less than through the high school program.
Less than through his schools.
Hence, no press, no publicity,
hence
total playground buzz and nothing else.
That's right. And his mother died when he was in high school, just going into high school, and so he had a tough time of it, and he went to his coaches and the father figures in his life for guidance at that point. He could have easily dropped out. He wasn't so remarkable a player that it was obvious he was going to go on, but he did stick to it, and now he's going to the NBA.
And it's not, when I say I don't know whether he makes my definition of local hero, it isn't that local people didn't participate or that there aren't heroic things about his story. It's just that when I think of it, I think of somebody who somehow caught the attention of a community at a certain age, and the community followed their story as it built towards its culmination. And in that respect, in some ways, Dominique Dawes is truer to form, because she did come up through the programs that were in the Silver Spring, Tacoma Park area. She did begin to stand out, and like all young gymnasts, she sort of had this junior and then senior, level buzz as she got higher and higher. And so she's maybe a little bit more, I mean, you knew who she was when she was 14 years old, I think, in a way that you didn't know who Steve Francis
Steve was. Right. And although as a gymnast she was old by the time she was recognized, but
that's just the weirdness of
but
gymnastics.
Yes, I know. If you're not recognized nationally by age 11, you're usually nobody. And the Dawes family is an old Tacoma Park family, been around for most of this century. So she fits that profile. He fits a different one. Although you could say, Steve came back after going off to junior college, came back to the University of Maryland, made Maryland a national power this year.
Yeah. I thought his going to Allegheny, actually, his story is he went to San Jacinto Junior College for 1 year, and that is, the junior college basketball mecca, but he left because he was too far away from home. That's sort of the hometown part of his story for me when he goes to Allegheny Community College, which is not on the map in a big way among junior college basketball programs. Going to Maryland is sort of, if he wasn't there, he could have been at Virginia, he could have been at Iowa. I mean, once you hit that level, kids are mostly just looking for the best opportunity. And so, I mean, I don't have the strong feeling that Maryland was the place that he'd set his heart on playing. You don't sort of hear that come up a lot.
Well, maybe not, but he did put Maryland on the map this year.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was an above average, but not spectacular team.
It would have been more of a slap in the face if he had gone to Duke, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And crushed Maryland every opportunity. Well, now Steve has talked about doing something for Tacoma Park, for the community, for the Boys and Girls Club, when he gets his millions, as he undoubtedly will get. Does that redeem him more as a hero?
See, I don't think he needs redeeming. I just think that in terms of speaking about him as a local hero, you sort of say, well, where's the local impact? And since I don't actually think of the University of Maryland as a grassroots local thing, but more of a, it's our large university basketball program, and most population areas have one or two, and this one's ours, but it's not like we built it with our own little hands,
Yeah.
But if he comes back to the community and says, yeah, this is where I grew up and nobody knew me then, but everybody's going to know me now because I'm going to do some terrific things here and help other kids, well then...
That's what Springsteen did.
Everything is different then. Everything is different once somebody says, yeah, I adopt this place. This is my place. I grew up here and you didn't know me then, but I remember and I'm going to make something of it. And a lot of guys don't do that. I mean, Patrick Ewing has never really gone back to Boston, say, and said, look, I'm going to make something happen here. Michael Jordan's presence in, say, Wilmington, North Carolina is not nearly what it is in Chicago, Illinois. I mean, there's a great, they make decisions at certain points and say, okay, this is where I'm going to pretend I live, or this is where I'm going to make myself known. I'm going to adopt this community. It's very few guys who go back to where they came from and adopt that community, though.
Yeah, well, I think that's true. But I mean, they're young.
True.
I mean, they're kids, really, both of them still, and so they have years to do that. I mean, are we making a mistake by putting too much of an expectation on them, or I mean, should we even really think of them in the same way we would think of, let's say, some other prestigious person in town like Carol Browner, who's head of the EPA?
No, we shouldn't think of them in the same way because, I mean, primarily, as you say, they're 22 or whatever years old, and they don't have, the maturity of years. On the other hand, they've been given their chance to make their mark early in their lives, perhaps rather than later in their lives. I mean, particularly if you are an athletic figure, your glory years can be gone by the time you're 35. So it's a different, it sort of skews everything has to happen earlier for you. And so if you have a chance to do something fantastic, you kind of need to do it early.
To do it now. Well, if you were giving advice to, to Steve, if you were getting 10%, if you were getting 10% of Steve's paycheck.
But that's a big point. I mean, I don't know who his agent is off the top of my head, but a lot of these guys, I mean, Steve Smith, who went to Michigan State and signed a big contract with the Atlanta Hawks, gave millions of dollars, I want to say it's $2.5 million, $3 million, to start an athletic study center at Michigan State. It was the first athlete to do something like that. He obviously had a great idea, and he got good advice, and the benefits for him in terms of his public image were enormous. Steve Francis wants somebody like that around him, it seems to me, who can get people on his side. Because if you don't do it, it can cause you problems in a lot of ways, even on the court. For instance, you know, whether Allen Iverson, who I think is, you know, right now the best player in the NBA, if he can harness himself, if he can overcome a lot of what's gone wrong for him. And some of that is a problem of his lack of cultivating his image.
We're going to leave it there. We're going to leave that with that advice to Steve. Thank you, Jim, for being here.
Thanks,
Thank
Howard.
you for your profundity. I'm Howard Cohen, and this has been Body and Soul.
The April edition. See you next month in the Coffee House.